It was my birthday, my big birthday. The kind of milestone people write cheeky Instagram captions about and take a week off work to celebrate. I had been meticulously planning the ultimate event for months. A masquerade party at an old renovated theater downtown. Velvet curtains, chandeliers, champagne towers, the whole 9 yards. The theme was mystique and decadence. If Gatsby had walked in, he'd have tipped his hat and left out of sheer intimidation. I'd rented the place and hired a caterer. I even found a DJ who agreed to play only jazz electro remixes for the night. The guest list was capped at 50, a perfect mix of friends, co-workers, and a few acquaintances whose aesthetics would match the vibe. It wasn't just a party, it was a production, and I was the director. Of course, every director has to make tough calls, and mine was about my brother, Sam. Sam and I are close, in that we'll always be there for each other in a crisis, but argue constantly about literally everything else. He's the kind of guy who shows up at casual family dinners in pajama pants and thinks a beer he found in the back of his fridge is the perfect contribution to any event. He's charming in his scruffy, couldn't care less way, but Sam at my party? I could already picture him rolling in late, unmasked, cracking jokes about how everyone looked like they'd lost a fight with a Mardi Gras float. And let's not forget his habit of commandeering the AUX chord to play his sick playlist, which is basically just Nirvana on repeat. I could have invited him. I mean, he is my brother. But the truth? Sam would have stood out like a ketchup stain on silk. And for once in my life, I wanted something unblemished. I figured he'd understand if I explained it was a specific kind of party and not really his scene. He hated dressing up anyway, so I didn't think he'd mind. The night of the party was magical. People showed up in suits and gowns, faces obscured by feathered masks and glittering lace. The champagne tower sparkled under the chandeliers, and the music was intoxicating. It was everything I'd envisioned. Halfway through the night, someone raised a glass to toast me, and I actually teared up a little. I felt like a star, like I'd pulled off something extraordinary. Then, sometime around midnight, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sam. "Cool party. Thanks for the invite." Attached was a photo of him standing outside the theater, maskless and holding a greasy slice of pizza. My stomach sank. He'd found out. I stepped into the hallway to call him, hoping I could defuse whatever this was before it turned into a thing. He picked up after one ring. "Hey," I started, my voice chipper but already wobbling. "What are you doing outside? Did someone post about the party? Does it matter?" His tone was sharp, clipped. Pretty clear I wasn't on the list. Just wanted to see what the big deal was about. "Sam, it's not like that," I said, though it kind of was. "It's a very curated event, you know? The vibe is important, and I didn't think you'd enjoy it." "You mean you wouldn't enjoy it with me there?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made me wince. "Guess I'm not curated enough for your big fancy debut." "That's not fair," I argued. "It's not personal." "Not personal? I'm your brother, Clara. I've had your back since the day you dyed your hair green in 8th grade and Mom grounded you for a month. And you don't even think I'm worth a pity invite?" I tried to explain that it wasn't about worth. It was about the event's tone, the experience I was trying to create. But every word out of my mouth felt hollow, and Sam wasn't buying it. "You know what?" he said, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Forget it. I hope your curated crowd is everything you dreamed of. I'll be at Mike's, having a beer in my uncultured pajamas." And then he hung up. I went back inside, my stomach twisting. The party raged on, and everyone seemed blissfully unaware of the sibling drama unfolding in the wings. People kept coming up to me, complimenting the decor, the music, the food. I smiled, toasted, even danced a little. But the moment felt fractured, like there was a crack in the perfect facade I'd built. Later that night, I lay in bed, still in my gown, my makeup smudged and mask forgotten on the floor. I replayed Sam's words over and over in my head. Was I really such a snob? Or was it okay, just this once, to create something that felt pristine, even if it meant leaving out someone I loved? The next day, I texted Sam. No long explanations or apologies, just a photo of us as kids, wearing cheap plastic masks from a dollar store, pretending to be superheroes. The caption was simple: You'll always be my favorite sidekick. Let's grab pizza soon? He didn't reply for hours, and when he did, it was just a thumbs up emoji. I think we're okay, but the guilt still lingers. Part of me wonders if I was protecting the party, or just protecting myself from feeling embarrassed. Either way, the question gnaws at me. AITA? Okay, let me tell you about the time I accidentally ruined my best friend Megan's engagement party. Well, accidentally might be a stretch. Technically, I ruined it on purpose, but not in the malicious, sabotagey way. More like the "this is going to be so much better if everyone just trusts me" way. Spoiler alert, they did not trust me. Megan and I have been best friends since middle school. She's the planner, the one with the spreadsheets and color-coded calendars. I'm more of the creative whirlwind who throws together brilliance at the last minute. Somehow, it's always worked for us. So when she got engaged to Brandon, who's as boring as a plain bagel, I promised to throw her the most amazing engagement party ever. She hesitated for like 2 seconds before agreeing, probably because she knows I can be a bit unconventional, but she wanted a low-key celebration, her words, and I figured, sure, I can do low-key. No problem. The original plan was simple, a cozy little backyard barbecue at her parents' house. Burgers, hot dogs, lawn chairs, and twinkly string lights. Megan even sent me a checklist, because of course she did, with things like coordinate caterer, make Spotify playlist, and confirm delivery of custom cake. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a snore fest. This was my best friend's engagement, a life milestone, and she wanted lawn chairs? Around this time, I got obsessed with the idea of turning the whole thing into a surprise theme party. Megan and Brandon met on a trip to Paris, so naturally, I thought, why not a Parisian soiree? Elegant and romantic, with berets, baguettes, and maybe a mime or two. It would be the perfect way to show everyone what love and glamour look like. Of course, I didn't exactly tell Megan I was changing the plans. I figured she'd freak out over the details and micromanage it to death, so I just didn't mention it. I mean, it was still technically an engagement party, right? The what was the same, just not the how. First, I nixed the barbecue catering and booked this cute little French bistro to deliver hors d'oeuvres, croissants, macarons, mini quiches, the works. I replaced the lawn chairs with bistro tables and rented an Eiffel Tower-shaped cake stand. Oh, and I hired a guy I found on Craigslist to dress up as a street performer and walk around playing the accordion. The piece de resistance, though, was the dress code. No one was getting into this party without a striped shirt or a beret. I sent out new invitations with the theme and RSVP details, but made them look super official so people wouldn't think to check with Megan first. Genius, right? The day of the party, I showed up at her parents' house 3 hours early to set up. Megan, meanwhile, was getting ready at her apartment, thinking she was coming to the backyard barbecue she'd been envisioning for weeks. By the time she arrived, everything was in place. The fairy lights were strung, the accordion guy was stationed by the front gate, and the air smelled like fresh-baked croissants. I was buzzing with excitement. She walked in with Brandon, both of them in jeans and t-shirts, carrying a 6-pack of beer, and immediately froze. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the Eiffel Tower cake stand like it had personally insulted her. "Surprise," I said, throwing my arms wide. "Welcome to Paris." The silence that followed was not the reaction I'd been hoping for. Megan blinked at me, her jaw tightening. "Where are the burgers?" Brandon asked, genuinely confused. Meanwhile, Megan's parents were trying to figure out why there were tiny plates of foie gras on their backyard table. I launched into full salesperson mode. "Megan, come on, it's so you. Paris. Romance. Your love story. I even got an accordion player." I pointed to the guy, who was in the middle of a surprisingly soulful rendition of La Vie en Rose. Megan stared at him, then at me. "You changed everything? Without asking?" "Well, yeah," I said, trying to keep it light. "But it's still an engagement party. Just fancier." Her face went red, and not in the happy, blushing bride way. But I didn't want fancy. I wanted a barbecue with my friends and family, not whatever this is. She waved her hand at the French bistro table setup like it was covered in rats. "Okay, but look at the cake stand. I said, trying to salvage the situation. Isn't it amazing? It's shaped like the Eiffel Tower. Megan hates Paris, Brandon said suddenly, cutting through the tension like a butter knife. Everyone turned to him, including me. What? I asked, confused. She met you there. Yeah, but we got food poisoning the second day, Megan snapped. We literally joke about it all the time. I hate Paris. Oh. For the rest of the evening, Megan avoided me, and Brandon spent most of his time shoveling quiche into his mouth to avoid talking. The accordion guy, sensing the vibe, packed up early. Megan's parents tried to smooth things over by saying it was a very creative idea, but the damage was done. By the time the party wrapped up, I felt like I'd ruined more than just the evening. I apologized profusely, of course. Megan eventually forgave me. She always does. But things have been a little weird since then. She won't let me near any wedding planning, and whenever someone brings up the engagement party, she gives me this look like I'm a golden retriever who just peed on the carpet. So, AITA for turning my best friend's chill barbecue into a surprise Parisian-themed extravaganza? I swear, my heart was in the right place. It started with a Facebook post, as most modern disasters do. My cousin Joanna, who lives 2 states away and only ever visits when someone's dying or getting married, had announced her promotion at work. I'm officially the youngest marketing director in the company's history, she wrote, followed by a string of emojis. A champagne bottle, a star, and some flexing arms. The likes and comments poured in. People were tagging her, calling her a girl boss, saying they always knew she'd make it big. I read the post 3 times before scoffing and setting my phone down. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for her. I was. But youngest marketing director felt so specific. Like she'd found the one niche award she could win and built her whole personality around it. I mean, technically I'm the youngest person in my office to learn how to fix the Wi-Fi printer, but you don't see me bragging about it online. That evening, my mom called me out of the blue. I should have let it go to voicemail. Did you see Joanna's news? She chirped before I could even say hello. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Isn't it amazing? You know, she's worked so hard for this. I remember when she was taking those night classes. I cut her off. It's great, but let's not act like she was clawing her way out of the gutter. Uncle Dave practically owns half that company. There was a pause. Well, my mom said carefully, it doesn't hurt to have connections, but she still had to prove herself. You know, not everything is handed to people. Sure, I said, but it's easier to climb a ladder when it's already leaning against the right wall. She sighed, and we changed the subject, but the conversation stuck with me. It wasn't that I was jealous, exactly. I just hated how people acted like success was the same for everyone. My life had been a grind, every inch earned through sweat and sleepless nights. Nobody handed me a ladder. I had to build one from scratch. The next day, my younger brother Will invited me over for dinner. He and his wife Emily had just moved into their new house, and apparently, they were still in that honeymoon phase where they thought hosting was fun. When I arrived, they were beaming, like real estate agents in a glossy brochure. Isn't it great? Emily gushed, gesturing at the open-plan kitchen and gleaming countertops. We've been saving for years, and it finally paid off. It's nice, I said, trying to sound supportive. I mean, good for you guys. Of course, housing prices weren't this crazy when I bought my place, so I can only imagine how hard it was. Will gave me a look, but Emily didn't seem to notice. She launched into a monologue about interest rates and renovation plans, while I nodded politely, waiting for an opening. Speaking of homes, I said when she finally took a breath, I just finished paying off my mortgage last year. Took me 15 years of tight budgets and skipping vacations, but I did it. That's amazing, Emily said, though her smile looked a little strained. I don't think we'll ever be able to do that. The market's just so different now. I shrugged. It's all about priorities, you know? I always told myself, do you want a nice house now or a comfortable retirement later? It's not easy, but you figure it out. Will cleared his throat, clearly wanting to change the subject. So, Joanna got promoted, he said. Pretty impressive, huh? I rolled my eyes. If by impressive, you mean predictable. She's been riding Uncle Dave's coattails for years. Come on, Will said, frowning. She works hard. I'm not saying she doesn't, I replied. But let's not pretend she's breaking records. I had to start at the bottom of the barrel. Remember my first job at that call center? It was soul-crushing, but I stuck it out. Joanna's idea of a bad day at work is probably running out of oat milk for her lattes. Emily excused herself to check on the oven and will turn to me, lowering his voice. Do you even hear yourself? You can't let anyone have a win, can you? It's like you have to remind everyone that your life was harder. That's not true, I said, feeling my face flush. I'm just being honest. It's not my fault if people don't want to acknowledge the reality of how things work. Reality, or your version of it? Well, shot back. Sometimes, people just want to celebrate without a side of cynicism. The rest of dinner was awkward. Emily kept the conversation light, talking about paint colors and garden plans, while Will avoided eye contact. By the time dessert came out, I was counting the minutes until I could leave. Later that night, back home in my quiet, fully paid-off house, I replayed the evening in my head. Was I too harsh? Maybe. But wasn't it important to remind people of the bigger picture? Success wasn't just about hard work. It was about context, about recognizing the invisible boosts some people got while others had to fight for every scrap. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Joanna. It was simple. Hey, I heard what you said about my promotion. That really hurt. I thought we were supposed to support each other. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of guilt and defensiveness. It wasn't like I'd lied. And yet, the words, I thought we were supposed to support each other, lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. I wrote back, sorry if it came across that way. I wasn't trying to hurt you, just sharing my perspective. Congrats again on the promotion. She didn't respond. All day, I thought about her text, about Will's comment, and about that look Emily gave me at dinner. Was I just being honest, or was there something deeper at play? Did I really need to remind everyone how hard my life had been? Or was I doing it because I needed them to see me as, what? Stronger? Smarter? More deserving? By the time I went to bed, the question was still gnawing at me. I tossed and turned, unable to shake it. When I told Uncle Leo about the offer, he nearly spit out his coffee. Not in surprise, exactly. More like exasperation. His signature move. You're kidding me, right? He said, swiping a napkin from the counter to dab at his mouth. They want to make you the head chef? Of a restaurant? In France? Yes, I said, dragging out the syllable. I braced myself for the follow-up. It was Leo. After all, there was always a follow-up. And you're thinking about it? Like, seriously thinking about it? He waved the napkin for emphasis. After all we've built here? The we in that sentence carried the weight of our family history. Late nights in the cramped kitchen of Nana's Pizzeria, Leo barking orders while I burned my hands on oven trays. He'd been the one to teach me how to fold dough, how to balance tomato acidity with just the right pinch of sugar. And now, after years of hustling, we had our own place, Lupo's. Well, technically it was his place. But I'd been there from the first coat of paint on the walls to the first customer walking through the door. And now, someone wanted me, not Uncle Leo, not Lupo's, to come work in Lion under a Michelin-starred chef. It was as much a dream as it was a sucker punch. Leo, I said, trying to keep my tone level, this is an amazing opportunity. You know that. He tossed the napkin onto the counter and shook his head. Amazing for who? For you. Sure. But what about the rest of us? What about the restaurant? You're the heart of this place, kid. You leave, and it's never going to be the same. I rubbed my temple. It was barely 8 a.m., and already the argument had begun to cycle like a broken record. You're being dramatic. Lupo's isn't going to collapse just because I'm not here every night. It's not dramatic, it's facts, he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. You think people come here just for the pizza? No. They come because they know you. Because they trust you. And they'll still trust you, I said. You taught me everything I know, Leo. You can teach someone else. Or hire someone. He scoffed. Hire someone? Like it's that easy? Like I'm gonna just pick some stranger off the street and say, hey, wanna be the new Sophia? No one's you, Soph. That landed harder than I expected. Maybe it was the way he said it, like it was a fact, not a compliment. Or maybe it was the guilt I'd been trying to ignore ever since the email came through. I'm not you either, I said after a long pause. I'm not settled. I'm not ready to stay in one place forever, doing the same thing every day. I want more. Leo stared at me for a moment, then let out a long breath. More, he repeated. Right, because what we've got here isn't enough. That's not what I meant, I said quickly. You just want to leave. I get it. He grabbed his coffee cup and walked toward the sink, his back to me now. You're not the first Lupo to think about running away, you know? But just remember, Sophia, when you run, you leave things behind. I didn't answer. What could I say? That he was wrong? That I wouldn't be leaving him behind? The truth was, I didn't know how to leave without breaking something. For the rest of the week, Leo barely spoke to me unless it was about dough ratios or inventory counts. I tried to tell myself he'd come around, but each silence felt heavier than the last. And it wasn't just Leo. My mom, his sister, wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea either. You know how he is, she said over the phone one night, her voice low so Dad wouldn't overhear. He's stubborn, but he means well. He's proud of you, even if he's terrible at showing it. Then why can't he just say that? I asked, pacing my tiny apartment. Because he's afraid, she said simply, of losing you, of what happens if the restaurant changes, of everything. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear. I'm afraid too, you know. This isn't an easy decision. I know, sweetheart, but Leo's not the one you need to convince. It's yourself. The next day, I found Leo at the back counter, kneading dough like it had insulted his mother. I waited until he paused, wiping flour off his hands, then slid a piece of paper across the counter. What's this? He asked without looking at it. My resignation, I said. His hands froze. He stared at the paper for a long moment, then back at me. You really think you're ready to leave? No, I admitted, but I think I have to. He frowned, but there was no anger in his face now, just exhaustion. You think a fancy French restaurant's going to make you happy? I think I won't know until I try, I said, and if it doesn't, I'll come back. But Leo, I need to find out. He nodded slowly, then picked up the paper and ripped it in half. Leo, listen, he interrupted. Your family, Sophia. You don't need a resignation letter to leave. If you're going, just go. But don't expect me to pretend it doesn't hurt. I'm not asking you to pretend, I said softly. Just don't hate me for wanting this. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned back to the dough, folding and pressing it with deliberate movements. I watched him for a while, then left without another word. I start in line next month. Leo hasn't called, but Mom says he talks about me all the time. Sometimes, I wonder if I made the right choice. If chasing a dream is worth the cracks it leaves behind. The idea was simple. Our dad was turning 60. A milestone, a big deal. I thought, hey, let's throw a party he'll never forget. Alice thought, hey, let's throw a party he'll never forgive. Okay, maybe that's dramatic, but her ideas were something. While I envisioned a full-scale bash, think lights, caterers, maybe even a live band, Alice was all about keeping it personal, which, fine, sounds harmless, but her version of personal meant inviting only us, his immediate family, to go camping. Camping, for a man whose idea of roughing it was eating a steak without A1 sauce. I stared at her notes in the dock, highlighted in neon green like it was a high school group project. A bonfire? S'mores? You want Dad to spend his 60th birthday swatting mosquitoes and pretending he likes acoustic guitar sing-alongs? Alice smirked from across the room. We were camped out in her living room, laptops open, snacks scattered between us. You know he loves nature, she said. No, I corrected. He loves sitting near nature, on a deck, with a cold beer and zero proximity to raccoons. She rolled her eyes. He's always talking about wanting more quality time with us. This is perfect. No distractions, just us. And poison ivy, I muttered. Would you rather have him awkwardly mingling with your accountant friend and that one guy you dated who still comments on all your Facebook posts? Ouch. First of all, I said, ignoring the jab, it's called being civil. And second, yes, I think he'd love a real celebration. You know, with friends, and speeches, and food that wasn't cooked over a fire in a tin can. Alice leaned back against the couch and crossed her arms. You just want to make it about you. What? I blinked. That's ridiculous. Oh, come on, she said, smirking now. You love throwing parties. It's like your thing. This isn't about what Dad wants. It's about what you think is impressive. That stung, mostly because I was terrified it might be true. Sure, I loved throwing a good party, but I wasn't doing this for the Instagram likes or the compliments. Was I? No, I shot back, a little too defensively. This is about making him happy. He's spent his whole life taking care of us. Don't you think he deserves a night where everyone shows up for him? Alice softened a little, which made me suspicious. She never gave up that easily. I get that, she said, but I think you're missing the point. Dad doesn't need a bunch of people making speeches about him. He needs a night where he can actually relax and be himself. Not the guy everyone expects him to be. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. She wasn't wrong. Dad'd have this way of putting on a show when he was in a crowd. Smiling, laughing, making jokes, but it could be exhausting to watch. Maybe even more exhausting to be. Still, the thought of scrapping my whole vision felt like a betrayal. I'd already mentally booked the venue and pictured the cake. One of those over-the-top ones shaped like a fishing reel, since Dad was obsessed with fishing. We don't even have the same version of him in our heads, I muttered, scrolling aimlessly through Pinterest party boards. You see this quiet, introspective guy who just wants a peaceful night. I see someone who'd have a blast in a room full of people who love him. Maybe he's both, Alice said, and that made me pause. It wasn't a bad point. Dad wasn't one thing. He was complicated. A little stoic, sure, but also secretly sentimental. He could be loud and funny with his friends, but he also loved those rare moments when it was just us, sitting around the dinner table, sharing stupid inside jokes. Okay, I said, trying to sound casual. What if we combine our ideas? Alice arched an eyebrow. I'm listening. We start small, I said, warming to the idea as I spoke. Just us. Maybe dinner at home, or a fancy picnic. Something intimate, like you want. And then... Oh no, Alice groaned. And then, I continued, ignoring her. We surprise him with a bigger party. Nothing crazy, just friends. Maybe a slideshow of old photos. It'll be like 2 phases. Intimate first, then festive. Alice frowned, chewing on her bottom lip like she always did when she was thinking. So, basically, we get what you want. That's not fair, I protested. You get your quality time. I get the celebration. Everybody wins. And what if he hates it? She asked, still skeptical. He won't, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. It's Dad. He's impossible to disappoint. That part was true. Dad had this way of appreciating even the smallest gestures. But that didn't stop my stomach from twisting as we hashed out the details. What if Alice was right? What if I was making this about me? Or worse, what if the whole thing ended up being a mess? Half-baked and awkward, leaving Dad caught between 2 clashing ideas of what his birthday should be? When the big day came, my nerves were shot. The dinner went perfectly. Steak, mashed potatoes, a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey. He seemed genuinely happy, laughing at Alice's ridiculous stories and even tearing up when we gave him his gift, a framed map of all the lakes we'd fished together, with little pins marking each spot. And then came phase 2. When he walked into the surprise party, I swear, he froze. My heart sank for a split second, wondering if we'd made a terrible mistake. But then his face lit up. Not the polite, performative smile I'd worried about, but something real. He hugged his old friends, laughed at the slideshow, even let someone convince him to dance to an 80s song that he hated but secretly loved. At the end of the night, after the guests had trickled out and the house was quiet again, Dad pulled me and Alice aside. Best birthday ever, he said, pulling us both into a bear hug. Alice shot me a look over his shoulder, half smug, half conceding. But later, as I lay in bed replaying the night in my head, I couldn't help but wonder, did we nail it? Or did Dad just love it because he loves us? I knew the second the words left my mouth that it was a mistake. but I couldn't stop myself. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Lila, I don't think you're ready to marry him. There it was, out in the open, irrevocable. My sister's fork froze halfway to her mouth, her salad trembling precariously on its tines. She blinked at me, her usual soft hazel eyes now hard as amber. Across the cafe table, I could feel the chill of her silence spreading. People say that time slows down in moments like these, but for me, it felt like a fire alarm going off in my head. Loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. Abort, abort, abort. What did you just say? Lila asked, her voice low and dangerous. I should have softened it, said it better. Picked literally any other moment than over lunch 2 weeks before her wedding. But my mouth, emboldened by 2 sips of overpriced rose, kept going. I just think maybe you're rushing into this. Nate is well, he's not exactly what you've always dreamed of. Her expression didn't just fall. It dove headfirst off a cliff. What the hell, Ivy? You're supposed to be happy for me. This is my wedding, not some debate club where you get to play devil's advocate. I am happy for you, I said quickly. I'm just worried. Nate's kind of dismissive of you sometimes, isn't he? Like, remember when we were at Mom's last week, and you tried to tell him about your promotion, and he... Oh my God, are you serious right now? She cut me off. You're nitpicking one stupid moment? He was tired. He's been under a lot of stress. I wanted to backtrack, to smooth it over, but I also couldn't let it go. It's not just one moment, Lila. I've seen how he talks to you when he's annoyed. He jokes at your expense. He interrupts you. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just want you to think about what you deserve. Because it's more than that. The table felt like it was vibrating with tension. Lila leaned back, crossing her arms so tightly it looked like she might implode. You don't know him like I do, she said, her voice trembling. He loves me. He supports me. And for the record, I get to decide what I deserve, not you. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the cafe's noise swelling around us, the clatter of dishes and murmured conversations pressing in on me. I know it's not my place, I said, trying to reel this disaster back in. But you're my sister. If I didn't say anything and something went wrong, I'd never forgive myself. Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. So you're already assuming my marriage will fail? Wow, what an honor to have such faith from my own sister. Lila, no, I pleaded. I don't think that. I'm just saying. Don't bother, she snapped, standing abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound slicing through the air like a knife. If you can't support me, then don't come to the wedding. I stared at her, stunned. What? Lila, you don't mean that. She grabbed her purse, her eyes glinting with tears she refused to shed. I do mean it. I don't need your judgment, Ivy. I need your love. And clearly, that's too much to ask. With that, she turned and stormed out, leaving me alone at the table with 2 half-finished salads and the distinct sensation of being punched in the gut. I couldn't move for a solid minute, replaying every word we'd just exchanged, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Was I too harsh? Should I have kept my mouth shut and let her figure it out on her own? But then I thought about Nate, how he'd rolled his eyes when she excitedly showed us her engagement ring, how he'd joked about her being bad with money in front of strangers at a dinner party, how he'd cut her off mid-sentence when she was trying to explain why she loved a particular book. All those little moments added up to something that felt big, something that had planted a seed of doubt in my mind that I couldn't ignore. I thought about texting her, but what would I even say? Sorry for caring about your future sounded passive-aggressive, and I love you but not Nate wasn't exactly going to fix anything. So I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, my appetite gone and my chest aching with regret. Later that night, my mom called me. What happened with you and Lila? She asked, her tone tight with concern. She's in her room crying, saying you don't want her to be happy. Mom, that's not what I said, I sighed, pressing my palm to my forehead. I explained the conversation, every painful word, but it didn't make me feel any better. I just want her to think about this. I mean, Nate isn't awful, but he's not great. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted her to be sure. Mom was quiet for a moment. Ivy, I know you mean well, but sometimes people have to make their own mistakes, even the big ones. She loves him, and she's chosen him. If you push too hard, you'll only drive her further away. But what if he is a mistake? I whispered, the words heavy on my tongue. What if I'm right, and she gets hurt? Then you'll be there to help her pick up the pieces, Mom said softly. That's what sisters do. But this is her choice. I didn't sleep much that night. My head was a tangled mess of guilt, frustration, and sadness. Did I overstep? Should I have trusted her to know what was best for herself, even if I wasn't sure? Or was I right to speak up, to try to protect her from what looked like a bad decision? All I wanted was for her to be happy. But now I've lost her trust, maybe even my place at her wedding. So tell me, AITA? It started with a canvas. Not just any canvas, a massive, gallery-worthy beast of a thing that practically swallowed the corner of the art supply store. Hazel stood in front of it, hands on her hips, her face lit with the kind of determination that made me instantly nervous. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and certainty. I need this, she declared, as if the canvas were oxygen and she'd been holding her breath her entire life. I glanced at the price tag and felt my stomach tighten. You want this, I corrected gently. There's a difference. No, Nate. I need it. I have this vision, this massive, sprawling piece. It's going to be breathtaking. This canvas is the start of it. I rubbed the back of my neck, already dreading where this conversation was headed. Hazel was an artist, an incredible one. Her pieces were bold and chaotic, full of life and emotion. She poured herself into her work, often literally. I couldn't count the number of times she'd come home with paint smudged on her face or in her hair. But she was also impulsive, with a tendency to follow her creative whims without stopping to think about how much they cost. And this canvas? It cost a lot. Okay, but do we really need to buy this one? I asked, trying to sound supportive instead of skeptical. What about something smaller? Or, I don't know, a few smaller ones. Hazel's jaw tightened. It has to be this one. The scale is part of the vision. You can't chop a masterpiece into pieces. I resisted the urge to point out that she hadn't painted it yet, so calling it a masterpiece felt a little premature. Instead, I said, right, but our budget this month is already tight. Remember? We agreed to hold off on big expenses until after the holidays. Hazel crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. So, what? You can drop $700 on a new gaming PC, but I can't spend half that on a canvas? That's different, I said defensively. The PC was an investment. I use it for work and to play games for hours, she interrupted, her voice sharp. But I'm not supposed to invest in my work? This is literally my career, Nate. Or did you forget that? Her words hit harder than I expected. Hazel was a freelance artist, which meant her income was unpredictable at best and non-existent at worst. We'd agreed early in our relationship that I'd cover more of the bills to give her the freedom to pursue her art, and I was okay with that, proud of it, even. But moments like this, when her dreams clashed with our reality, made me feel like I was stuck in a riptide, pulled between being supportive and being practical. It's not about forgetting, I said finally, trying to keep my tone even. It's about priorities. We have to be careful right now. You know that. Hazel didn't respond right away. She just stared at me, her expression shifting from frustration to something heavier, something I couldn't quite read. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out of the aisle, leaving me standing there with the weight of my own guilt pressing down on my chest. We didn't talk about the canvas for the rest of the day, or the next. The silence between us wasn't angry. Exactly. It was worse. It was hollow. And every time I caught Hazel staring at the blank walls of her studio or doodling absent-mindedly on scraps of paper, I felt like the world's biggest jerk. By the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into her studio, where she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching in her notebook. She didn't look up when I entered. "Hey," I said awkwardly. "Can we talk?" She shrugged, still focused on her sketch. "What's there to talk about?" "I've been thinking," I said, sitting down across from her, "about the canvas. And I get it. Okay? I get why it's important to you. Hazel glanced at me, skeptical. You get it? Yes, I said, nodding. I do. You're an artist. You need space to create. I want to support that. But I'm also, I don't know. I'm scared, I guess. Scared of overspending. Of not having enough for emergencies. It's not that I don't believe in you or your work. It's just, money freaks me out sometimes. She set her notebook down, her expression softening slightly. Why didn't you just say that? I don't know, I admitted. I guess I didn't want you to think I didn't trust you or your instincts. Hazel was quiet for a moment, chewing on her bottom lip the way she always did when she was thinking. I'm scared too, you know, she said finally. Not about money, but about not being enough. Like, what if I don't take the leap and then I regret it forever? Or what if I do, and it's a complete disaster? Either way, I'm failing, and I hate that. Her words hit me like a gut punch. I'd been so focused on my own fears that I hadn't stopped to consider hers. Okay, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind. What if we make a deal? Hazel raised an eyebrow. A deal? Yeah, we'll get the canvas, but we'll also set some boundaries. Like, if we're spending on something big, we talk it through together. No surprises, no impulsive decisions. And we figure out a way to balance it with the budget. Whether that means cutting back on something else or spreading the cost out over time. Sound fair? Hazel tilted her head, considering. And what do you get out of this deal? I get to keep my sanity, I said with a grin, and maybe a few less panic attacks. She laughed, a real, genuine laugh, and for the first time in days, I felt like we were back on the same team. Deal, she said, reaching out to shake my hand. But for the record, this canvas is going to be epic. I don't doubt it, I said, even though I kind of did. We bought the canvas the next day. It took up an obscene amount of space in her studio, and for weeks, it sat there, untouched, while Hazel stared at it like it held the answers to all of life's questions. But when she finally started painting, I saw it. The masterpiece she'd been talking about. It was chaotic and beautiful and uniquely hers. And in the end, it sold for way more than we spent on the canvas. So now I'm asking, AITA for needing compromise? Or was Hazel wrong to push so hard for something we couldn't easily afford? Or maybe this was just another way of learning how to share a life without losing our minds. It started with an invitation I never wanted. My cousin's wedding is next weekend, Matt announced one morning over breakfast, as though this was news that wouldn't ruin my entire month. Cool, I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible while stabbing at a piece of scrambled egg. I knew better than to say too much. Matt had a way of steamrolling conversations, and I wasn't about to get flattened. You'll love it, he continued, oblivious to my non-committal reply. It's at that vineyard outside of town. Open bar, good food, and best of all, he paused for dramatic effect, his grin widening. I RSVP'd for both of us. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering onto my plate. You what? Relax. I know you don't like weddings, but this one will be fun. Trust me. Trust him. There it was. Those two cursed words that made my blood simmer every time he said them. Matt loved to play the role of benevolent dictator in our relationship. He had a knack for deciding what was best for me without consulting me first, whether it was planning date nights, picking restaurants, or, apparently, committing me to a 6-hour event with his extended family. I didn't agree to this, I said firmly, crossing my arms. But you'll love it, he repeated, brushing off my protest like a piece of lint. Besides, you owe me one. Remember how I went to your friend's weird art exhibit? First of all, you didn't go. You showed up late, ate all the free hors d'oeuvres, and spent the whole time complaining about how the sculptures looked like haunted furniture. Second, I didn't RSVP for you without asking. Matt waved me off like he was shooing a fly. You're being dramatic. It's just one night. You'll survive. At that moment, I decided survival wasn't the goal anymore. Winning was. The rest of the week passed in tense silence. I let Matt believe I was begrudgingly going along with his plan. Let him prattle on about what he'd wear and how much fun we'd have. Meanwhile, I was laying the groundwork for a masterstroke of chaos. My secret weapon? Matt's deep-seated aversion to unpredictability. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early and started packing. Not for the wedding, though. No, I had a different destination in mind. Why are you packing a bag? Matt asked, half distracted as he struggled to tie his tie. Oh, didn't I tell you? I said innocently, zipping up my duffel. I made plans too. I'm going camping this weekend. His tie dropped to the floor. Camping? What the hell are you talking about? We have the wedding. You have the wedding, I corrected, hoisting the bag onto my shoulder. I never agreed to it. And since you clearly had no problem deciding my plans for me, I figured I'd return the favor and decide my own. Matt stared at me, dumbfounded. You're kidding. Do I look like I'm kidding? I could see the gears in his head turning, trying to process this unexpected rebellion. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed, You can't just bail. What am I supposed to tell everyone? I don't know, Matt. Maybe that you should have asked me first. And with that, I walked out the door. Here's the thing about Matt. He's not a chaser. He's the kind of guy who expects the world to rearrange itself around his convenience. So I wasn't surprised when he didn't follow me to the driveway. What did surprise me was the text I got later that afternoon. Matt, hope you're happy. Everyone's asking where you are, and I look like an idiot. Me, sounds like a you problem. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? Beyond measure. But, as it turns out, Matt wasn't done yet. I had barely pitched my tent and lit a campfire when another text came through, this one dripping with sarcasm. Matt, guess what? Your camping trip got canceled. Check your email. Confused, I opened my inbox and found a notification. My campsite reservation had been mysteriously canceled, per request. I could practically see Matt's smug face through the screen. Two could play at this game. I hopped into my car, drove 30 miles to the nearest coffee shop, and spent the next hour booking the most elaborate, over-the-top, non-refundable luxury spa package I could find. 5-star resort, champagne on arrival, the works. I made sure to leave Matt's name on the reservation, knowing full well he'd get the email notification. The next text came almost immediately. Matt, what the hell is this? Me, just a little improvement to your weekend plans. You'll thank me later. He called, but I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. I could already imagine the conversation. Him yelling about how ridiculous I was, me countering that I was just making things better. It was all too predictable. By the end of the weekend, we were both out hundreds of dollars, emotionally drained, and still refusing to admit defeat. When I finally got home Sunday night, Matt was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a grim expression. He didn't look up when I walked in. Have fun at the wedding? I asked, dropping my bag by the door. He smirked without humor. Have fun camping? We sat there in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken grudges. Finally, Matt broke it. You know this is insane, right? Completely. And you're not going to apologize, are you? Not a chance. Another pause. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, the spa package was a nice touch, though. Petty as hell, but creative. I grinned despite myself. You're not so bad at petty either. We both laughed, but it didn't change the fact that we'd spent the weekend waging a war of stubbornness that accomplished absolutely nothing. So, Reddit. AITA? The day started with a sense of triumph I couldn't shake. After weeks of planning, I was finally about to pull off the ultimate surprise for Jules. I'd arranged a private dinner at an art gallery downtown, candles flickering among sculptures, soft piano music weaving between the paintings. It wasn't just about the aesthetic, though. Jules loved art, and this gallery housed their favorite piece, a moody watercolor of a forest clearing we'd once seen on a rainy afternoon. I even convinced the owner to let us dine right in front of it. The plan was simple. I'd pretend we were headed to a new restaurant I wanted to try, and then, bam, Jules would walk into the gallery and find everything set up just for us. It was foolproof, or so I thought. At around noon, Jules texted, Jules, can you meet me at the park at 5? Dress comfy. Me, the park? Why? Jules, surprised smiling face with smiling eyes. I stared at the message, my heart doing a strange little flop. A surprise? For me? Today? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to ask questions. but I stopped myself. Jules loved surprises as much as I hated spoilers. I figured I'd play along, then guide them smoothly to the gallery afterward. 2 surprises, 1 evening. What could go wrong? By 5 p.m., I was wearing my least flattering sneakers. Why dress comfy? Trudging into the park with a growing sense of unease. I spotted Jules by a wooden gazebo, waving like they were directing air traffic. Behind them, I noticed a pop-up canopy with fairy lights strung around it, a picnic blanket laid out nearby, and was that a projection screen? My unease deepened. Happy anniversary! Jules grinned, pulling me into a hug. Okay, so this is just part 1 of the evening. First, a cozy picnic. Then, we're watching a movie I made for you. Well, not made, edited. It's all our favorite clips and moments from the past few years. And they gestured to a tripod. There's also a mini photo shoot planned. Just the 2 of us. I stared at them, my stomach sinking. How was I supposed to tell Jules that my meticulously curated gallery evening was waiting to unfold across town? This wasn't just an adorable effort. It was the kind of thing that required real thought, real love. A DIY movie? Jules wasn't even tech-savvy. They must have spent hours on it. That's wow, I said, plastering on a smile. You really went all out. Only the best for you, Jules said, beaming. The next hour was an exercise in mental gymnastics. We nibbled on the picnic Jules had packed. Cheese, crackers, and these weird lavender cookies that I pretended to enjoy. Meanwhile, I was racking my brain for ways to pivot the evening without ruining Jules's plans or giving away mine too soon. Every time they mentioned the movie, I cringed internally, picturing the gallery owner nervously checking his watch. When the sun started dipping below the treeline, Jules pulled out a small projector and set it up on the tripod. Okay, ready for the premiere? Actually, I started, then faltered. This is amazing, Jules, really? But I, kind of have something planned too. For later. Jules froze, the projector remote dangling from their fingers. What do you mean? I mean, I booked us a private dinner, I blurted. At the gallery downtown. It's for tonight. Their face shifted through a series of emotions. Confusion, surprise, a flicker of disappointment. The art gallery? Yeah, I said, scrambling to sound upbeat. Your favorite painting is there. I thought it'd be romantic. Oh. Jules set the remote down slowly. That's wow. You planned all that? I nodded, the weight of their silence growing heavier by the second. I didn't know you were planning something too, I added. If I'd known. No, they said quickly, forcing a smile. It's sweet. It's just, they gestured at the setup. I worked on this for weeks, you know? I really wanted it to be special. And it is special, I said, guilt churning in my chest. But the gallery is kind of time-sensitive. The staff is waiting for us. Oh, Jules said again, quieter this time. They looked down at the picnic blanket, fidgeting with the edge. I guess we can pack up early then. I hated how small their voice sounded, how their excitement had deflated like a balloon pricked by my stupid need to control the evening. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it, but I wasn't sure how. Then an idea struck. Wait, I said. What if we do both? They looked up, skeptical. Both? Yeah. Okay. Hear me out. We stay here for the movie, but we can take the projector with us to the gallery. After dinner, we can set it up there and finish watching. It's still our night, just a little rearranged. Jules's eyes softened, a cautious smile tugging at their lips. You think the gallery owner will be okay with that? I'll make it work, I promised. They owe me. I bought their overpriced membership. That earned a laugh from Jules, and just like that, the tension eased. We packed the picnic in record time, shoving cookies and camera gear into Jules's tote, and booked it to the gallery. By the time we arrived, we were both breathless but giggling, the absurdity of our scrambled evening starting to feel like an adventure. Dinner was magical. The candles flickered, the piano music swirled, and Jules's face lit up when they saw the painting. I even convinced the gallery owner to let us set up the projector afterward, and we watched Jules's movie in the glow of the fairy lights, surrounded by art and the faint hum of the city outside. It wasn't perfect, But maybe that was the point. Life with Jules was never perfect. It was messy, creative, full of surprises that didn't always align but somehow always worked out in the end. As I leaned into them during the final montage, I realized that tonight was as much a celebration of that imperfection as it was of us. Still, I can't shake the feeling I steamrolled their plans a bit, even with the compromise. So, AITA? The whole debacle started with a simple group dinner. My cousin Greg had this brilliant idea to do a friends and family feast night at a trendy new Korean barbecue spot downtown. I'm usually indifferent to these outings, but Greg and his crew are notorious for their lack of organizational skills, and the thought of another split-the-check chaos ordeal gave me an eye twitch. So, I stepped up as the responsible adult again, and told everyone I'd handle the reservation and the bill. I booked a prime spot for 8 people on a Friday night. No small feat, this place was packed weeks in advance. I also coordinated arrival times, dietary restrictions, and parking suggestions because, for some reason, no one else is capable of basic logistical thinking. It felt like herding cats, but I managed it, and we had an amazing time. Drinks were flowing, the grill was sizzling, and everyone left in a food coma. It was perfect, until it came time to pay. The total bill came to $427.65. A little steep, but what do you expect when Greg orders the most expensive sake and Lisa insists on just one more round of Wagyu beef? Everyone agreed we'd split it evenly. I whipped out my card, paid the entire bill, and said, "Just Venmo me your share later. It's $53.46 each." Everyone nodded, and I felt smugly efficient. Later that night, the Venmo request went out. Most people paid within a day. Greg, of course, was late. He's always waiting on his next paycheck. Lisa sent an emoji-laden note with her payment. Something like, sparkling heart, so much fun. Let's do it again soon." Spoiler, she didn't mean it. But my Aunt Claire sent $85 instead of $53.46. I noticed it immediately. Claire's not great with tech, so I figured she must have hit the wrong button. I even opened her payment message, expecting some sheepish admission like, "Oops, sent too much." But no, all she wrote was, "Thanks for organizing everything." I stared at that message for a long time. It sounded so intentional, like she knew she was overpaying but didn't mind because she appreciated my efforts. It felt nice, honestly. No one ever really acknowledges how much work goes into organizing these things. Usually, I get stuck playing the unpaid event coordinator, and everyone just assumes it's my duty because I'm the responsible one. This time, though, Claire seemed to get it. She recognized my value, and I thought, maybe this is her way of saying thank you. The next day, Claire texted me, "Hey, I just realized I overpaid you for the dinner. Can you send back the difference?" I blinked at my phone. The message felt like a slap in the face. Realized? What was there to realize? She literally typed out $85 in the payment. It wasn't like Venmo has a mind of its own. And honestly, why would she want it back? I did organize everything. I did front the entire bill. I did deal with Greg's flakiness and Lisa's chronic indecision. Surely that's worth an extra $31.54. Still, I didn't respond right away. I wanted to think about it. The more I did, the more it felt like Claire's initial payment wasn't a mistake at all. She'd said, "Thanks for organizing everything." That sounded deliberate. Why should I have to return it just because she changed her mind? If anything, she should feel lucky to have someone like me handling things. Without me, she'd probably still be standing outside the restaurant, wondering why the reservation disappeared. The next day, Claire texted again. "Hi, just following up about the money. I could really use it back this week. My car repairs cost more than expected." I felt a twinge of guilt, but brushed it off. I mean, her car problems weren't my fault. Why should I have to adjust my finances because she can't keep her budget in check? Besides, it wasn't like she'd be destitute without $31.54. Claire has a good job, a nice house, and 0 kids. Meanwhile, I spent hours of my life coordinating a dinner that everyone else got to enjoy without lifting a finger. I sent a carefully worded response. "Hey Claire, I totally get where you're coming from, but honestly, the extra you sent felt like a kind gesture for all the effort I put into planning the dinner." I spent a lot of time making sure everything went smoothly, and your message really meant a lot. I hope you understand." Her reply came within seconds. "Are you serious? I didn't mean to tip you. I just miscalculated. Send it back." At this point, I was irritated. Miscalculated? Who miscalculates 85? She could have double-checked before hitting send. And even if she did mess up, wasn't it her responsibility to eat the cost? That's what happens when you're careless with money. But Claire didn't let up. She texted again the next morning, this time with a longer message about how she'd always supported me and how this wasn't the way families should treat each other. That one stung. Claire had been generous in the past, loaning me money when I first moved out, buying me thoughtful gifts, even offering to help with my grad school applications. But still, this wasn't about her generosity. This was about principle. If she couldn't recognize the value of what I'd done for her and the group, why should I bend over backward to accommodate her? Greg got involved after Claire complained to him. He called me up and said, "Dude, just give her the money back. It's not that deep." But the thing is, it was that deep. To me, it wasn't about the $31.54. It was about respect. Claire might have overpaid, but she did so in the context of a situation where I'd gone above and beyond. I deserved that acknowledgement. Returning the money felt like admitting my time and effort weren't worth anything, and I wasn't willing to do that. Not this time. The group chat blew up when Claire finally aired her grievances there. Lisa chimed in with some phone-neutral comment like, "Oh, I thought it was a misunderstanding? Didn't know it was this serious." Meanwhile, Greg was trying to play mediator, typing things like, "Come on, guys. It's just a dinner bill." But the rest of the group stayed quiet, probably because they didn't want to get involved. Cowards. So now I'm here, stuck in a weird limbo. Claire's furious, Greg's annoyed, and I'm pretty sure Lisa's secretly enjoying the drama. Part of me wonders if I should have just sent the money back to keep the peace. But another part of me feels like this is a hill worth dying on. After all, if no one values my time, who will? AITA? The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the backyard as the guests began to arrive. I'd spent weeks transforming the space. String lights crisscrossing above the patio, vintage lanterns placed just so, and a playlist curated to shift from chill acoustic to danceable indie pop as the night wore on. This wasn't just a party. This was the party. My coming out party. Not the metaphorical kind, though honestly, that probably would have gone smoother. This was the soft launch of my dream. A supper club. I'd been obsessed with the idea for years, ever since I first saw one of those glossy Netflix docuseries where impossibly hip people cooked impossibly tiny portions of food and somehow made everyone swoon. After months of testing recipes, designing menus, and annoying my friends with endless questions about seating charts, I'd finally done it. Tonight, I'd turn a handful of unsuspecting guests into evangelists of my culinary genius. The menu was ambitious but personal. 5 courses, each inspired by a memory. There was roasted tomato bisque with a grilled cheese crouton for the summers at my grandma's house, seared scallops because I once cried over how good they were on a family vacation, and a pistachio tart to honor my first attempt at baking something other than boxed brownies. Every dish told a story, and every story, I hoped, would remind my friends why they believed in me. As people trickled in, I played the role of host with the kind of nervous energy that made me overly attentive to everyone's drink levels. Plates clinked, conversation bubbled, and everything was going exactly as planned. Then, just as I was about to plate the second course, the doorbell rang. Is that? Oh my God, it is. It's Danny, someone exclaimed. My stomach dropped. Danny wasn't just a guest. She was a wild card. A mutual friend who'd earned a reputation for being a little too much. She was the kind of person who'd show up to a casual hangout in a sequined jumpsuit and start passing out samples of her latest candle line. Because, naturally, she'd become a certified aroma specialist on a whim. But tonight, Danny arrived carrying something even more ostentatious than her personality. A towering, 3-tiered cake, sculpted to look like a blooming rose garden. Surprise! She announced, sweeping into the backyard like a gale-force wind. I made this for the party. The guests gasped in awe, rushing over to admire her masterpiece. It's stunning, someone said, their phone already out to take a picture. How did you even do this? Danny launched into an animated explanation of her technique, something about edible petals and hand-painted fondant. Meanwhile, I stood frozen by the kitchen door, holding a tray of scallops that suddenly felt very, very small. Wow, Danny, that's impressive, I said, forcing a smile as I joined the group. But, I actually already made dessert. Oh, I know, Danny said breezily, waving a hand. But I figured, why not bring something extra? Everyone loves cake, right? The guests laughed, and my heart sank. I watched as they cooed over her creation, their attention slipping further and further away from the meal I'd spent weeks perfecting. Danny, oblivious or indifferent, had effectively turned my debut into a launch party for her baking skills. I tried to let it go. Really, I did. But as the night wore on, the resentment festered. People kept circling back to the cake, asking Danny questions, taking more photos. No one was talking about the scallops or the bisque or the deeply emotional narrative arc of my pistachio tart. By the time we reached the actual dessert course, I was barely holding it together. When Danny took it upon herself to slice the cake and start passing out pieces before I'd even presented my tart, something in me snapped. Wow, Danny, I said, loud enough to cut through the chatter. You really know how to make an entrance. And a centerpiece. And a whole event, apparently. The backyard went quiet. Danny blinked at me, a knife still poised mid-slice. Excuse me? I mean, I get it, I continued, my voice trembling with the effort of keeping it steady. You're always the star of the show. But could you not have waited until the next party to show off your baking masterpiece? This was supposed to be about the meal, about my work. Danny frowned, her face a mix of confusion and indignation. I didn't realize sharing a cake was a crime. I just wanted to contribute something nice. Nice? I laughed, but it came out sharp and brittle. You hijacked my entire night. This wasn't about contributing, Danny. It was about making sure everyone noticed you. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the group. Someone muttered, awkward, while another tried to shush them. Danny's face flushed, her expression hardening. You're being ridiculous, she said, her voice low but cutting. I've supported you through everything, and this is how you repay me? By accusing me of stealing your thunder over a cake? It's not just the cake. I snapped, my hands balling into fists. It's every time you have to turn someone else's moment into your own personal spotlight. You can't just let other people have their thing, can you? Maybe I wouldn't need the spotlight if you weren't so desperate for everyone's approval all the time, she fired back, her words landing like a slap. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of too many unsaid things. Around us, the guests were either frozen in place or pretending to be very interested in the string lights. Danny shook her head and grabbed her purse, leaving the cake behind as she stormed out. The party fizzled out shortly after. People made awkward excuses, thanked me for the food, and left in ones and twos. When the last guest had gone, I sat alone at the table, staring at Danny's cake. It really was beautiful. Now, as I replay the night in my head, I can't decide who was more at fault. Did I overreact? Was it petty to call her out? Or was I right to stand up for myself, even if it meant ruining the atmosphere? The wind howled like a living thing as we crept into the old, crumbling house at the edge of town. None of us wanted to admit it, but we were scared, our bravado fading the moment the front door groaned shut behind us. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, dust, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. It was the smell that gave me goosebumps. Man, this place is trash, muttered Vince, his voice bouncing off the peeling wallpaper and warped wooden floorboards. He waved his flashlight around like it was a sword. I told you guys, it's just an abandoned house. Nothing spooky about it. Right? Because every abandoned house just happens to have no records in the county registry, and nobody knows who owns it, Mia shot back, her tone as sharp as her steps as she picked her way past an overturned chair. Totally normal. Relax, I whispered, though my own hands were clammy as I adjusted the strap of my backpack. We're here to prove there's nothing to the story. In and out. We get some pictures, maybe find a creepy doll for Instagram, and then we're legends. Legends, Mia echoed, rolling her eyes. But she didn't argue. The house seemed to shift around us, the walls groaning as if offended by our presence. We found what used to be the living room first. Faded floral couches were tipped on their sides, their stuffing spilling out like the guts of some long-dead beast. A record player sat in the corner, caked with grime but surprisingly intact. Mia swiped her finger across it, leaving a clean streak on the surface. "You think it still works?" she asked. "No way," said Vince. "That thing's older than your grandma." Mia pressed the power button anyway. Nothing happened. She shrugged, and we moved on. We stuck together at first, poking our heads into rooms that were more ruin than structure. The kitchen had a fridge still humming faintly, an unsettling anomaly that none of us wanted to touch. Upstairs, we found bedrooms with torn mattresses and water-stained ceilings. One had a child's drawing taped to the wall, the paper brittle and brown with age. It depicted a stick family standing outside the very house we were in, except the windows were all blacked out, and there was a tall figure drawn in jagged lines standing in the yard. Cool, Vince muttered, snapping a picture of it. "This is definitely going in the slideshow." We made it to the attic by accident. The stairs were hidden behind a door that we almost didn't bother opening. The moment we climbed up, the air felt different, heavier, like it was pressing against our lungs. The beams of our flashlights darted across the space, catching on cobwebs that shimmered like silver thread. There were crates stacked neatly in the corner, an old rocking chair that started creaking the moment we stepped in, and a mirror covered by a tattered sheet. "I dare you to look," Vince said, nudging me with his elbow. "Dare yourself," I shot back, but before I could stop him, he yanked the sheet down. The mirror was cracked, its surface warped in places. At first, it seemed like it was just reflecting us, three scruffy 20-somethings playing at ghost hunting. But then I noticed something off. "Hey, is it just me?" Or, I trailed off. Mia stepped closer, her brow furrowing. "Why is there someone behind us?" We all froze. In the mirror, there was a fourth figure, tall and shadowy, standing in the corner of the attic. I spun around, but the space was empty. "What the actual?" Vince began, but the lights of our flashlights flickered, then died. The attic plunged into darkness. "Guys," I gasped, panic clawing its way up my throat. "I'm here." Mia's voice came from my right, but it sounded distant, muffled. I felt Vince brush past me. "This isn't funny. Turn on your light." His words trembled, the bravado gone. "I can't." I fumbled with the flashlight, slapping it uselessly against my palm. When it finally flickered back on, I pointed it toward the mirror. It was empty. Where did it go? Mia's voice cracked. "Where did who go?" Vince hissed, and I could hear the wild fear behind his question. The thing in the mirror." I stammered, but my flashlight started flickering again, and this time, it wasn't coming back. I heard Vince swear under his breath as he stumbled toward the attic stairs. "We're leaving," he barked. "Mia, come on." "Wait." But as I turned to follow him, the sound of the rocking chair filled the space, slow and deliberate. I whipped around, and for a split second, I swore I saw a figure sitting in it, impossibly tall, its face obscured by the dark. My legs moved before I could think, tripping over each other as I bolted for the stairs. We didn't stop running until we were out of the house and halfway down the street. The adrenaline burned through my veins, but my body felt cold, my breath coming in gasps as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. "Did you see that?" Mia whispered, her voice shaking. "See what?" Vince snapped. He was trying to sound annoyed, but the fear was still there, raw and unhidden. "That thing in the attic," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. "In the mirror. It's just shadows, man. Old house. Our imaginations," Vince said, but he wouldn't look any of us in the eye. We didn't talk much on the way back to the car, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted but wired, replaying every moment in my mind. I set my bag down and reached for my phone, intending to scroll until I passed out. But when I unlocked the screen, I saw a photo sitting in my gallery, one I didn't remember taking. It was blurry and dark, but the unmistakable shape of the attic's rocking chair stood out. And in it, a tall figure was staring back at the camera, its face an empty, jagged smear. I didn't sleep that night. When my brother Ian called me out of the blue, I braced myself. Ian wasn't the kind of guy who called just to chat. He wasn't the kind of guy who called at all unless something was on fire, literally or figuratively. "Hey, sis," he began, his voice full of forced nonchalance. "Got a sec?" I leaned back in my chair, already regretting this conversation. "What's up?" "Well," he said, drawing out the word like a magician about to reveal a rabbit, "I'm in a bit of a pickle. Totally temporary. Just need a place to crash for a week or two." Ian's life was a series of pickles. He'd quit his stable job 2 years ago to follow his passion, whatever that meant, and since then had ping-ponged between cities, girlfriends, and ideas that were definitely going to take off this time. He was charming, sure, but charm only got you so far when your life was a one-man circus. "I don't know, Ian," I said hesitantly. "You've got a history of, overstaying your welcome." He chuckled. "Come on, you're not still mad about the lasagna incident, are you?" I was, actually. That lasagna pan had never been the same. But Ian was family, and despite everything, I loved the guy. So, with a sigh, I agreed. "But 2 weeks," I said firmly, "and you have to stick to the rules." Ian showed up the next day carrying nothing but a backpack, a skateboard, and a plant in a ceramic skull pot. "Her name's Delilah," he announced, setting the plant on my coffee table like it was a sacred relic. "She's been with me through thick and thin." Delilah was the first red flag. The second was Ian's insistence on good vibes only, which seemed to mean blasting reggae music at all hours and wearing a bathrobe like it was formal attire. The third was his version of helping around the house, which included reorganizing my spice rack alphabetically, but only the ones he liked, and installing a hammock in the living room without asking. At first, I tried to be accommodating. I cooked his favorite meals, stocked up on his preferred snacks, and even loaned him my Wi-Fi password so he could get some work done. But Ian's definition of work turned out to be brainstorming ideas for a podcast he wanted to start about existential skateboarding. Meanwhile, my apartment began to look like a cross between a dorm room and a bohemian flea market. Ian had a knack for accumulating random objects, candles shaped like Buddha, a ukulele he couldn't play, a collection of mismatched mugs he found on sale. He also had a habit of leaving half-empty coffee cups everywhere, like he was marking territory. "Ian," I said one evening, stepping over his skateboard for the 100th time, "I need you to be more mindful of the space, and maybe tone down the reggae. My neighbors are starting to complain." He looked genuinely surprised. "What? Reggae is like the least offensive music ever. It's about peace and love." "That may be true," I said, "but not at 2 a.m. He shrugged, unbothered. "Noted." The turning point came when I came home from work to find Ian sitting cross-legged on my kitchen floor, surrounded by candles, with Delilah in the center like some kind of botanical deity. He was chanting something under his breath. "What are you doing?" I asked, dropping my bag. "Cleansing the energy," he said without opening his eyes. "Delilah's been feeling a little off." "Delilah is a plant," I snapped. "She doesn't have feelings. And neither do I when it comes to my rapidly escalating electricity bill." Ian finally looked up, his expression one of wounded enlightenment. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "You used to be so chill. What happened?" "What happened?" I wanted to scream, was Ian. But instead, I took a deep breath. "Ian, you said this was temporary. It's been 3 weeks. You haven't applied for a single job, your podcast is going nowhere, and you've turned my apartment into a shrine to chaos." He stared at me like I just kicked Delilah off a cliff. "I can't believe this," he said, standing up. "You're seriously prioritizing materialism over family? You've changed, man." "No," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "I'm prioritizing my sanity. I love you, Ian, but you can't stay here anymore." His face hardened. "Fine," he said, grabbing Delilah and his ukulele. "I'll leave, but don't expect me to forget this." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. A few hours later, I got a text. "Forgot my hammock. Coming back for it tomorrow." Now, my apartment is quiet again, save for the faint smell of incense lingering in the air. Every now and then, I'll scroll through Ian's Instagram and see him in someone else's living room. Delilah perched in the background, his captions dripping with philosophical indignation about people who just don't get it. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday, slipped under my apartment door like a secret. The envelope was black, the handwriting gold and flowing. "You are cordially invited to the Masquerade of Fates," it read. No address, no sender. Just a time, 11:59 p.m., and a single instruction. "Come as you are, but mask your intentions." I almost threw it out. It reeked of some weird art school prank or viral marketing stunt. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. By Friday night, it had twisted itself into a knot in my chest. What if it wasn't a prank? What if it was something extraordinary? By 11:30, I was in an Uber, wearing a plain black suit, an old theater mask I'd found in a thrift shop, and a nagging sense that I was making a mistake. The driver dropped me at an unassuming alley downtown. At the end of it, a set of wrought iron gates stood open. Beyond them, light flickered, golden, inviting. The air smelled of rain and ozone, though the sky was clear. A man in a crimson waistcoat and a porcelain mask greeted me as I approached. "Your invitation?" he asked, his voice rich and smooth. I handed it over. He studied it, then stepped aside with a bow. "Welcome. Your choices await." Inside, the world transformed. The garden beyond the gates was otherworldly. Lanterns floated without strings, casting warm light over cobblestone paths and fountains that gushed wine instead of water. The guests, dozens, maybe hundreds, moved like phantoms, their faces obscured by masks of every shape and color. Music wafted from nowhere, a haunting melody that seemed to thread itself through the air. I wandered, trying to blend in. Conversations hummed around me, fragmented and cryptic. "He chose the tower and never came back," one masked woman whispered to another. "Did you hear about the girl who opened the red door?" someone else murmured. Everywhere I turned, there were stories half told, hints of danger wrapped in elegance. At the heart of the garden stood a massive oak tree, its branches heavy with lanterns. Beneath it, a long table stretched, laden with food and drink. A man in a mask shaped like a raven's beak stood at the head, his voice booming over the crowd. "Welcome to the masquerade," he said, raising a goblet. "Tonight, you will walk paths unseen, make choices unheard, and face the truths you hide from yourselves. Remember, every door opens a destiny, but not all doors lead to safety." Chills prickled my spine. This wasn't a party. It was something else, something ancient and arcane. After the toast, the crowd began to disperse, moving toward the edges of the garden, where paths branched off into darkness. Each path was marked by an archway, and above each archway hung a symbol, a key, a flame, a moon, a serpent. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, until a figure approached me. She was tall, her mask shaped like a butterfly with shimmering blue wings. "You haven't chosen," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "Chosen what?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Your path. Everyone must choose." She gestured to the arches. "The key for answers, the flame for passion, the moon for secrets, the serpent for power. What happens if I don't choose?" She tilted her head, the butterfly wings catching the light. "Then the night chooses for you, and it's rarely kind." That was enough to push me toward the arches. The symbols glowed faintly, as if alive. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I needed to decide quickly. My eyes landed on the moon. Secrets. It felt right. Before I could overthink it, I stepped through the archway. The garden dissolved. I was standing in a long corridor, dimly lit and lined with doors. Each door was different, some ornate, some plain, some old and rotting. A faint whispering filled the air, like voices just out of reach. The door closest to me was painted a deep blue, its handle shaped like a crescent moon. I reached for it, hesitating only for a moment before turning the handle. The room beyond was a library, but not like any library I'd ever seen. The shelves were impossibly tall, stretching into darkness. Books floated off their shelves, rearranging themselves as if alive. In the center of the room was a mirror, its surface rippling like water. As I stepped closer, My reflection sharpened, but it wasn't me. Not exactly. The figure in the mirror looked like me, but older, tired, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. "What do you want to know?" it asked, its voice hollow and resonant. I swallowed. "What is this place?" The reflection tilted its head. "It is what you make of it. A test, a gift, a curse. The question is not what this place is, but what you will take from it." Before I could respond, the room began to shift. The shelves trembled, the books whispered louder, and the mirror rippled violently. A sense of urgency gripped me. The reflection smirked. "Choose wisely." I turned to run, but the door I had come through was gone. In its place was another archway, this one marked with a silver star. Without thinking, I ran through it. I was back in the garden, gasping for air. The oak tree loomed ahead, its lanterns flickering like dying stars. The crowd was thinner now, the music quieter. The butterfly-masked woman appeared beside me again. "Did you find your truth?" she asked. "I don't know." She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Few do, the first time. I wanted to ask her what that meant, but before I could, the bell struck midnight. The lanterns dimmed, the guests began to fade like mist, and the garden dissolved around me. When I woke the next morning, I was back in my apartment, the mask still clutched in my hand. The invitation was gone, but the memory lingered, vivid, unshakable. Every now and then, I catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of gold, a whisper of music, and I wonder, was it real? And if it was, what was the fate I left behind? It began with a goldfish, or rather, the goldfish, Gary, the pride and joy of my boyfriend Ethan's meticulously maintained aquarium. Ethan was obsessed with that tank, pouring hours into balancing the perfect pH levels and adjusting the lighting to simulate a natural aquatic environment. To me, Gary was just a fish, albeit one with a disproportionately smug expression for something with a 3-second memory. But to Ethan, Gary was practically family. He even had a tiny castle in his tank, like he was some sort of underwater king. The trouble started when my best friend Julia came over for dinner one night. Julia is the kind of person who has opinions about everything and isn't afraid to share them. She arrived in her usual whirlwind of perfume and laughter, tossing her coat onto the couch and inspecting the apartment like an art critic sizing up a new exhibit. "Wow," she said, stopping in front of the aquarium. "This is intense. Who's the fish?" "That's Gary," Ethan said, beaming like a proud dad. "He's a fantail goldfish." Julia raised an eyebrow. "A goldfish? You did all this for a goldfish?" Ethan's smile faltered. "Well, yeah. Goldfish deserve good habitats too." Julia shrugged, unconvinced. "Seems like a lot of effort for something you can win at a carnival." I felt the air change immediately. Ethan didn't say anything, but I could see his jaw tighten. Julia didn't notice. She tapped the glass with a perfectly manicured nail. "Does he do any tricks? Or is he just a fish?" "Goldfish aren't for tricks," Ethan said, his voice strained. "They're appreciated for their beauty and personality." "Personality?" Julia laughed. "Come on. It's a goldfish, not a dog." "Julia," I said sharply, shooting her a look. But the damage was done. Ethan's pride had been punctured, and from the way he was staring at Gary, I could tell Julia had ignited something. Something petty. Something dangerous. The next day, Ethan announced that Gary needed a friend. "It's not good for goldfish to live alone," he explained, even though Gary had been living alone just fine for over a year. I suspected this was less about Gary's social life and more about proving Julia wrong, but I didn't argue. What harm could another fish do? Gary's new tank mate arrived that afternoon. A sleek, black moor goldfish with bulging eyes and a dramatic, flowing tail. Ethan named him Sebastian. Gary, to my surprise, seemed immediately hostile. He flared his fins and chased Sebastian around the tank like a tiny, aquatic bully. Ethan fretted for days, adjusting the decor and adding hiding spots until the two fish finally settled into an uneasy truce. But then, things got weird. I was in the kitchen making coffee one morning when Ethan rushed in, holding his phone like it contained classified intel. "Gary's sick," he said. His voice panicked. "What do you mean, sick?" "Look at him," Ethan shoved his phone under my nose, displaying a grainy video of Gary hovering near the top of the tank, his fins drooping slightly. Maybe he's just tired? I offered, though I had no idea if fish got tired. Ethan shook his head. It's swim bladder disease. Or maybe fin rot. I need to get medicine. Medicine? For a goldfish? I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. Ethan's glare could have cracked the tank. Yes, for a goldfish. Would you say that if it was a dog? I decided not to answer. Within an hour, Ethan had returned from the pet store with a bag full of tiny fish antibiotics and special food. Gary, it seemed, was officially in intensive care. The situation escalated when Julia came over again a few days later. I'd warned her not to bring up the fish, but Julia is like a dog with a bone when she thinks she's found something ridiculous. "How's the king of the castle?" she asked, peering into the tank. "Gary's recovering," Ethan said stiffly, "but he's doing well." Julia squinted at the tank. "He doesn't look any different to me. Are you sure you're not imagining this?" "Julia," I said warningly, but Ethan was already in full lecture mode, explaining Gary's symptoms and treatment regimen in excruciating detail. Julia nodded along, barely suppressing a smile. "That's great," she said finally. "I just hope all this effort isn't wasted, you know? Goldfish don't live very long." "They can live up to 10 years with proper care," Ethan snapped. "Right," Julia said, biting back a laugh. "Good luck with that." After she left, Ethan was fuming. "She has no idea what she's talking about," he muttered, glaring at the tank as if Julia's doubt had poisoned the water. "Gary's going to outlive her cat. Just watch." Over the next week, Ethan's obsession with Gary's health reached absurd levels. He set up a spreadsheet to track Gary's eating habits and created a playlist of soothing underwater sounds to help him relax. At one point, he even suggested I stop using the blender because the noise might stress Gary out. And then, it happened. I came home from work to find Ethan sitting on the couch, pale and shaken. "Gary's gone," he said hoarsely. "Gone?" My heart sank. Despite everything, I'd grown attached to the little guy. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." Ethan shook his head. "No, I mean he's gone. He's not in the tank." "What?" I rushed over, scanning the aquarium. Sure enough, there was no sign of Gary. Only Sebastian hovered in the water, looking smug as ever. Maybe he jumped out? I suggested, though I had no idea if goldfish were prone to escape attempts. "I looked everywhere," Ethan said miserably. "He's just gone." We spent the next hour tearing the apartment apart, but there was no trace of Gary. Ethan was inconsolable, muttering darkly about faulty tank lids and predator birds. But as I stared at the tank, a horrible suspicion began to form. "Ethan," I said slowly, "do you think Sebastian ate him?" "What? No. Goldfish don't eat each other." "Are you sure? Because Sebastian looks pretty guilty to me." Ethan glared at the tank, horrified. "Sebastian would never." "He wouldn't." But his voice faltered. Sebastian stared back at us, his bulging eyes unreadable. The next day, Ethan returned the tank to the pet store. He couldn't bear to look at Sebastian anymore. As for me, I couldn't help but wonder if this whole mess had started because of Julia's stupid comment. If we'd left Gary alone, would he still be here? AITA for letting Ethan spiral into a rivalry with his own goldfish? Or was it Julia's fault for starting it? Or is this just the natural outcome of trying to assign personality to a fish?